Hello. Ever wonder what separates great tech leaders from merely good ones? How do you hire and let people go while building trust and keeping your team motivated? Is it better to be scrappy or a perfectionist in the fast paced tech industry? And with AI changing everything, how can young engineers secure the future? Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Sanjeet Sahay, former Amazon tech leader, author, and founder of LeaderHub. Today, I have invited my good friend and mentor, Tom Leszewski, a seasoned technology leader with decades of experience at companies like Oracle and AWS. Tom and I go way back to the early scrappy days at Amazon, where I learned firsthand from his unique and impactful leadership style. In this episode, Tom and I dive deep into critical elements of leadership in tech, including hiring A players, what it really means, and how to get out of their way to let them succeed. Firing with empathy, real stories letting team members go without burning bridges, mentorship and tough conversations, how to guide struggling team members back on track honestly and constructively. Scrappiness versus perfectionism, why the startup mindset often beats perfection, and how knowing when good enough truly is good enough. Startup versus big tech careers, which path sets young engineers up for success, growth, and financial stability. AI, quantum computing, and future-proof careers. Tom's insights into why AI might be hype without quantum computing, and how engineers can position themselves to thrive as tech evolves. You'll hear real-world examples from our days building teams at Amazon, Tom's bold predictions about AI and quantum computing, and practical advice for new grads and young engineers wondering how to secure their future in this rapidly changing industry. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's get started. Welcome to the podcast, Tom Leszewski.
Tom Leszewski. As you can see from my background, perhaps, I live somewhere other than a condo in New York City. I'm actually residing in Northwest Arkansas right now, and I moved here to partake in a lot of mountain biking. It's a fabulous area to be in recreation. But prior to that, I lived in New Hampshire, and that's where I got to meet Sanjeet, working at Amazon Web Services. I've had a long and splendid career, I think, in high tech. I feel a little bit boring sometimes because I talk to people and they're like, oh yeah, I owned a gas station at one point. I was a skydiver. I worked overseas and saved people and rescued people from missionary and doing missionary work. And I pretty much went to college for IT and tech. I graduated back in the late 80s, back when actually tech was sort of boring. And you had things called mainframe computers, and you had batch processing where most of your technology happened at night, and most of the tech was done on call, which was horrendous. Going to your point about your book and working hard, even back then, tech could be a excruciating place to work because you had to stay up late at night and solve problems, and we didn't have things like CI/CD and pipelines. You just had to figure it out, and you were diving into code and doing things like assembler coding, which is, I don't think, no longer present anymore. So yeah, I started off way back then. My ambitions were not that stellar at the time. I was a little bit listless in my early career, and just wandered around. But I ended up at a small startup, and you didn't call them startups back then, in Phoenix, Arizona. Moved to escape the snow of Wisconsin, and it was a great experience. Like, you can't capture that chemistry, that newness, that freshness, that ambiguity that you experience in a startup. And it was great. But what happened is, in classic startup fashion, because a lot of startups fail, I quit. And about a month later, the banks closed the startup because they were running out of money.
Wow.
And they lost their way. They had a great product. And this goes to a lot of companies that I worked for. It starts with either a great culture, a great product, perhaps a good market that's underserved, or perhaps good customer service, and then one of those pillars fail along the way, and this company did that. And so responded to an ad in a newspaper. Imagine that, getting a job through a newspaper. Full-page ad to work for Electronic Data Systems, who was the big behemoth at the time. To me, they were the precursor to cloud. They were actually the first cloud because it was a system running somewhere in some big data centers that was abstracted from you, and you interacted with it, through a terminal, just like we do now, sort of through a browser,
Yeah.
and worked for them, and decided that it wasn't going to work for me because I actually sent a email to the CEO, Les Arbuthal, of EDS at the time, because there was a client server class, and client server was something new and unexplored at the time. And the class got canceled because no one was attending the class, because mainframe were the institution, were the way to make business at EDS. And I recognize the fact that times were changing. And if I look at my career, there's been, and I don't have to go into them now, Sanjeet, but there's sort of 4 different transformational periods in my career. And one of them, of course, was from old mainframe systems to client server distributed computing. And EDS fell to that. They failed to adjust. They failed to transform. They failed to morph into a new company. And I actually started working with Sybase technology and Sun Microsystems, the old pizza boxes. And that led to getting a job at Sybase, and sort of transformed my career from someone who worked on COBOL coding and mainframes into someone that wrote in C and worked on relational databases, which were quite new at the time. And then Sybase, sort of like my first startup that I worked for, Sybase faltered too. They had a good product, but then it sort of turned to shit. I think their mistake, Sybase's mistake, was the fact that they licensed their technology to Microsoft, and of course Microsoft took that and said, okay, we're just going to own this on our own after the contract came due, and we're going to develop SQL Server, which sort of smited Sybase into oblivion.
Wow.
And I saw that coming. Once again, I think I've had a lot of looking around corners and foresight in my career, and I'm like, Sybase is doomed. They're done. And so I called a recruiter that I've been working with, and I told the recruiter, I said, I want a job. It's a job at Oracle, and do not call me back until you find me a job at Oracle. And she had a lot of fortitude and perseverance, and she called me back like a month later, to my surprise, and said, I got you a job at Oracle, even without my any experience at Oracle. That led to an enduring career at Oracle, spending about 15 years there. But at the tail end of my career, it was about in 2009, I had a coworker, and actually a person that worked for me, that was in a corn shell screen, and they were setting up some servers, and I said, what the hell are you doing there? And this was probably circa 2009. And they said, well, I'm working with this new thing from Amazon. And of course, when they said Amazon, I said, what the hell, selling books? I mean, Amazon was known as a retailer, not a tech company. And he said, no, Amazon Web Services. They got this new thing called the cloud. And I looked at it, and within 10 minutes, I was convinced that Oracle was done. I had to find a new job, and I became definitive. Once again, not having a backup plan, I said, I'm gonna work for AWS. And in 2012, things came to fruition. And I never forget the day. And Sanjeet, this was a little bit before you started. And where I walked into the offices, actually in my earphones was Eminem playing, and it was shit. I forgot the song. What's the Eminem song?
Eminem song? I don't know.
One shot. Lose yourself. Lose yourself.
Lose yourself. Okay.
So the theme of Lose Yourself is you got one shot, one opportunity. You got to seize it. You got to capture it. And you don't give yourself an option. So that was my philosophy going into AWS, is that I didn't have a backup plan. It's just my one shot, my one opportunity, and I was either going to seize it or fail. And I got the opportunity at AWS. I got the nickname Scrappy during the interview process, because everyone saw me as very ingenious and resourceful, and someone that just broke through obstacles and got things done regardless of sort of the setup, the situation, or the blockers in the way.
We'll talk about
and then subsequently, I started as a solution architect, which was sort of interesting because I'd sort of risen a little bit more in my career. And this actually goes into your book a little bit as well. Is I don't think that this whole idea you move up in a company that's hierarchical. You go from, a developer into a project manager or a leader, a team leader, and then you go into management, and then you go into executive management. I've really, through my career, I've sort of meandered and tried different things. There's a book called Range, which I really enjoy, that describes the fact that if you have a diversity of skills, you worked in a number of roles. I even think working in a number of roles, and this is what I liked at AWS in the early days, is that I was part solution architect, part marketing person. I was part business development person. I was part sales. I mean, you have to be able to play all those roles, because a company, as they're small, they can't afford to have 6 different people playing those roles. And I think as a company gets older, which we'll go into, I'm sure, Sanjeet, it tends to be like, hey, this is your job. Stay in your swim lane. You can't do other things. With AWS in the early days, as you can attest to, it was like, hey, you just do something. If someone tells you to go out and to try to solve a security problem and you have no expertise in security, you just find a way to do it.
It's like somebody pushed you into a swimming pool. You don't swim.
Learn how to swim.
You did not want to. All right.
Yeah, and
that's great. I think, Tom, I have captured so many things that we can actually dive deep upon. The first thing that I want to talk about now, do you have more to add?
No, I was just gonna send it off. I was ready to summarize it. I know there was a lot of things that I don't delve into, but I was just gonna summarize it with saying,
sure,
I got the big opportunity, which probably changed my life and hopefully changed a lot of other people's lives. So I've always gravitated towards leadership. And the reason I like leadership is not because I'm in control, not because I'm in power, not because I get to make all the decisions, not because I get to tell people what to do, but it's simply working with other people. You can have, it's a force multiplier. You as an individual can only achieve so much. You hire the right people, give them the opportunity to succeed, let them fail, are supportive, are empathetic, are compassionate. People can do great things. And I love to see people succeed around me. I love to put myself out of a job, and this opportunity to lead the GSI SA organization, the Global Systems Integrator organization.
So my question is to you now is, what would you, if you have to if a person came to you asking for leadership advice, he is fairly senior already in his role, but he is struggling with, or they are struggling with their team, as to they're not able to grow it the way it was growing earlier. Is it due to lack of mechanisms? Is it due to lack of empathy within the team? Because you touched upon empathy, you touched upon being a force multiplier. Are you giving people the opportunity to grow, bring in new ideas, diverse perspectives, so that you can formulate a new plan? Is that all happening, or is it like a top-down push to do things a certain way? What would you recommend?
Wow, I have so many thoughts in my head there, but I think first and foremost, and it might have been in one of my recent Is Bullshit blogs, the critical piece, and Mark Andreessen touches upon this a lot, and when he talks, is that you have to hire A players. And I think there's a couple of components to that. Some people are afraid to hire A players. I really think it. They're intimidated. They feel like this person's going to take my job. I never felt that way. I want to hire people that are a hell of a lot smarter than me. And you hire those smart people, and you get the hell out of the way. Like you said, I gave you direction. Yeah, you want to point them. You want to help them network. I think that's critical as well in order to help people grow, is connect them to the right people. Make sure their network is profuse and as deep and as profound as yours. You want to coach them and make sure they don't make mistakes. But everyone is different. And I think that's the other problem with a lot of leaders, is they treat everyone as a widget. They treat everyone identical. Not everyone's the same. I think it's bullshit. See, I'm using is bullshit a lot. I think it's bullshit to try to improve someone's weaknesses. It's a futile effort. They're good at something. They're good at something for a reason, and that's why you hired them. And it goes back to diversity. You want people that are good at certain things. If everyone was identical, if everyone was like you and everyone was like me, the world would certainly, first and foremost, be a boring place, and it wouldn't be a productive place. You need different perspectives. You need different ways of thinking. You need people to be critical of doing certain things. So I think first and foremost, it's so important to hire the right people. People tell me, oh, this person sucks. And I'm like, well, either they suck to begin with, or you don't know how to hire. Because if you're hiring the right people and you're giving them the right environment to succeed, there shouldn't be a problem with those people. I do think there's key ingredients for the leader themselves. And I go in this, I talk about leadership and I talk about middle management and about how middle management can cause the death of an organization. But I'm not going to expound upon that right here unless you ask me another question about it. But I think first and foremost, a lot of leaders go into leadership for all the wrong reasons or are promoted for the wrong reasons. They're promoted because they're good at something. They're a really good coder. Well, being a good coder doesn't necessarily make for a person that's going to be able to lead people or negotiate or make decisions. So I think I talk about empathy a lot, and I'm so adamant about this. I think the second key ingredient is the leader themselves, and they need to have self-awareness. They need to be critical of themselves. They need to be compassionate. They need to be empathetic. They can't be a control freak. They can't be a perfectionist. And they can't look at everyone the same. I have to say, one of the first books I read, and someone asked me this early in my leadership career at Oracle, they said, man, you just do things so differently than the playbook, than the management playbook. Like, where did you learn that? And I said, I picked up a book called First Break All the Rules.
Yeah.
And I really like that book because one of the things in that book was, hey, there's a rule that says you shouldn't be friends and you shouldn't get to know the people that work for you. And I'm like, why the hell not? If we're in this together, if we want to support each other, we got to learn to know each other. We got to learn to know how that person functions. We got to learn to know how they treat their family and how they love their family and how they work with their family. What are their ambitions? What are their passions in life? You know, when is their birthday? What do they do for fun? I mean, I really think, and I know this is going to sound like outlandish in a way, is like you need to almost become friends, and you should become friends with all those people you work with. I mean, it's those moments. I mean, that you're a friend with this person. It's an indelible moment, right? It makes it no easier or more difficult. I think that's the fallacy too. I think people are like, well, if they're a friend, it's more difficult. It's like, not really, because you've talked to them and you know them.
Yeah, I think it's important to also, clarify what being friends mean. Does it mean that you're always in a socially cohesive and that happy environment? Friends are true to each other, meaning that they give positive and constructive feedback as well, right? If the person is deviating, you kind of warm that person up over a period of time that you said you did through discussions. And so, and as I said, it should not come as a surprise. So do you think that's the right way to put define a friendship?
Yeah, I think and I could go off on a severe tangent on this, Sanjeet. I mean, I think a true friend is a friend that you've had arguments with, you've had disagreements with. Some of the best friends I've had, we've had some of the most like what should be considered like despicable and vile and ruthless arguments, but that bonds you. I mean, adversity can really be a motivator and a bonder. So yeah, I think it's, not all the people you work with are going to be friends that you call up on an evening and say, hey, let's go out and party. I mean, you're probably going to have maybe social or religious or political differences with them. You're not going to hang out with them all the time, but there's certainly, from a friend perspective, it's someone that you share a common goal with, you have compassion for, you have a mutual understanding of each other's, and respect for each other. I think friendship is a lot about respect and mutual respect. Okay. So I think with this individual, Dave, I mean, I changed. When I came into the team, I told the team was more of technical account managers. So there were more people that engaged with relationship building, technical relationship building. And I really needed to move the organization to more deep technical.
Mm-hmm.
And Dave was one of those individuals that was having a hard time struggling with becoming more technical. I think the entire team elevated themselves during my tenure as a leader, and hopefully I had something to do with that. And I think Dave was one of those individuals that upped his game a little bit, but not quite as much as the other members of the team. I mean, there was team members that just became so fabulous in skills and abilities that they never had. And so David was a bit of a lagger. And so when I had that conversation with him, he did say, Tom, I knew this was coming. I knew that I was like the next person because there was someone else I had to let go with like 6 months ago. And they said that I knew that put me on the bottom of the stack. And I knew this was happening. And he goes, I don't blame you. I see it. And I look at it as like truly, and hopefully this isn't a justification and to satiate myself and make myself feel better. But I truly believe you're doing yourself a disservice by continuing to try to coach someone that you can tell is not going to contribute to what is necessary. I think you're doing a disservice because this person is floundering and what's going to happen is you're going to spend 90% of your time on the individuals that aren't contributing when you should be spending 90% of your time on the people that are contributing the most.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the inverse of where you should be spending your time. So not only are you quote unquote, wasting your time, I hate to use that, it sounds a little bit ruthless, but you're sort of wasting your time. The other individual is not progressing in their career. They're not in a spot where they should be. They're probably unhappy because they know they're not performing well. And so when I let Dave go, he was completely understanding of it. And like I mentioned earlier, he reaches out to me this day and says, Tom, I loved your leadership. I'd love to do more work with you. And in fact, some of these people, even they're like, hey, if you're hiring, hire me, which is a hard conversation to have because you're like, I probably wouldn't hire you again, knowing what happened before. And I think in answering your question, Sanjeet, I think one of the number one mistakes leaders make is they're not decisive enough with people. You can tell with probably 98, 99% accuracy whether someone's going to succeed or not.
Yeah.
You can tell. You have the intuition. You have the knowledge.
Day, you probably, decided to let go of a person who was pretty kind of not pretty close to you, but you know him personally, because as you mentioned, it could be difficult, and most people will ask that question. Okay, you are giving me that advice that be friends with people, and as you said yourself, how are you going to fire that person? Because that is inevitable. Because going back to your first principle that you need to hire well, you need to have good people in your team. And you need to weed out sometimes. I don't want you to be that person, but you need to let go of a few people who are not aligned with your mission and your organization in a way, or your style of working in a way. So how would you do that? I mean, any specific example that you can give?
I give a lot of examples. I mean, let me start with the first major one that comes in the top of my head. When I was at Oracle, I had an individual. So first and foremost, so let me preface this with saying, if it's a surprise, and if you have to be ruthless with someone, you're not a leader. You're not a leader. You're a manager. You're clearly not a leader, because it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone.
Yes,
they should see this coming. You should have communicated with them, and not through some kind of like contrived, plan, not through like a PIP, which is a performance improvement plan. It should be through regular conversation. This person should have a very good perspective on where they are in the organization, what their contribution is. And so when I've gotten rid of people, they've literally said to me, oh, shit, I know what this conversation is going to be. This is like the culmination. It's the culmination of a number of conversations we've had. And now we're making that final decision. It was an individual.
Kind of coach a person from going in that direction. Are there any telltale signs? Could you tell if that person is kind of clearly, deviating from, the team's tenets or organization tenets, and they need to be pulled back? Have you seen, success with, reconciliation of sorts? Has it worked? Or is
It
it?
has. It has actually. I would say I don't think if someone was going down the path of sort of an unsuccessful career demise, but I think an adjustment. And one story I could talk about, but I'll always remember this moment where I gave him like 3 or 4 items to work on in order to get promoted. And he was distracted with some other items. And I said to him prior to this, these are the 3 things. I've been told by leadership, I've been told by your peers, and I personally observed this. These are the 3 items you need to work on. You need to get more technical. You need to interact and broaden your network with some people, and you need to stay focused. He had a way to get distracted, which a lot of tech people do. I think a lot of tech people suffer from ADD. A lot of them are very distractible people, which also makes them hyper-focused. But so anyway, I was just frustrated. And we had a meeting in New York City. I'll never forget it, in the Sheraton in Times Square. And in classic Tom fashion, I guess, I was running late, and I have a tendency to not be punctual. And so we had a half-hour meeting scheduled, and I showed up with 10 minutes to spare, which actually sometimes it's good to run late to meetings, because now I was hyper-focused and I needed to get everything I needed to get done was in these 10 minutes. And I said to Paris, I said, and I'm going to use, I don't know if I can swear, but there was filled with a lot of vulgarity in inflammatory statements, but there are the 3 things you need to do. If you don't fucking do them, you're not going to get promoted. I can guarantee you're not going to be promoted. And stop doing what you're doing. Stop being distracted and trying to work with other organizations, and do these 3 things. And I can guarantee you, if you do these 3 things, you will get promoted. And the clincher was, and he just reminded me of what I told him. I said, and if you don't do these 3 things, I'm going to fucking fire you. So, not that I'm a tyrant as a leader, but sometimes you have to have those moments of clarity for people and be very overt, be very strong, be very firm, be very definitive, because sometimes people are like, well, they're just sort of saying that. Or, yeah, I like what I'm doing yet. But you have to provide them clarity. You have to give them a wake up. I did this to another individual. He told me on the phone, and I'll never forget this. He told me over the phone, he said, I don't want to work on those 3 things that'll help me get promoted. And I said, fine, then you will not get promoted. I can guarantee you 100% you will not get promoted. So you're making the decision right now. You're telling me, no, I want to get promoted. Well, then do these 3 things. And one of them was learning to work with a nemesis of his that had huge influence in the organization. And I knew this person was very, very influential to promotions.
Nemesis, okay.
And to disagree with this individual was going to lead to you not getting promoted. And I said, what you need to do, call up that person, become friends with them, make them a confidant, go to them with a problem, because this person loves to help people. And this person can help you. And if you go to this person, make yourself vulnerable, ask them for help, they will help you, because they do respect your abilities. In fact, they're probably a little bit threatened by your abilities, because there's this little bit of an ego clash. And I'm more smarter technically than you are. But if you go in there with the approach of, hey, I got a problem. In this case, it was a problem around blockchain and I need some help. This person helped them, introduced them to all people in the company, and 6 months later, they got promoted.
Yeah.
So I think you're just, and this, to expand this is general. I think leaders fail to be decisive. Consensus building, to me, is one of the worst things that you can do. It's good to get people's opinion. You talked about diversity. I love to people others' opinion. But then when you get to a certain point, you're saturated with information. You have all the facts, you have all the data, plus you have all the anecdotes, you have all the pragmatic decision-making power that you need. But yet you don't make the decision. And people do this all the time with personnel decisions, whether it be letting go someone, whether you're putting someone in a different role, whether reorganizing the company. I mean, I even think about our AWS days where I decided to just remove people from a certain GSI, and I'm not going to name the GSI because they weren't giving back. They weren't doing anything with AWS. Why do I have 4 people dedicated to you when you're not doing anything? And I just pulled the people off, and people are like, you just can't do that. And it's like, why not? It's an experiment. So to me, we always go back to this one-way and two-way door decision making, right? Mm-hmm. Which is an AWS thing, but I think it applies to life. I think too many people look at decisions they're making as one-way door decisions. They're fatal decisions. You can't retract them. You can't go back. When in reality, a lot of these decisions are two-way door decisions. They're simple decisions. You make them, you move on, you be compassionate, empathetic when you make them. You let people understand why you're making them. But just like with firing people, you got to make those decisions quick. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, waiting another 6 months is not going to change anything.
Yeah. But then some people might say that, you do not have to be popular all the time. You can take, difficult decisions and have that kind of propensity to make enemies at times. What would you say to that?
Well, I think, and you mentioned it maybe at the intro, is like, what would you recommend to people in their 20s and people, looking to build their career? I think the first rule is, and this is sort of trite in a way, but is you're going to offend people. Like, if you think you're going to make everyone happy and please everyone, you're not. And I think I spent a little bit too much time in my earlier career trying to please everyone, trying to make everyone happy. And it caused me, going back to your book, it caused me to work a hell of a lot because I just wanted to make my coworkers happy, my leader happy, my manager happy. And I wanted to just be driven by succeeding or getting shit done just for the sake of getting shit done, as opposed to looking at it and saying, what's the bigger picture? What's this going to lead to for both me, the company, the organization? And where can I be more surgical and be more judicious with my time? And I think that is a critical component of it, is starting your career in leadership is you do need to make decisions that aren't going to be, that people are going to not like. But I think the key when you make those decisions, that they can be more palatable when, number one, people feel like they're also making the decision. They're part of it. Like if people feel like they're an edict, that's not going to work. And I think, secondly, if you can position it and describe it in a way that is going to eliminate uncertainty. I think people are afraid of change not because of change, but because of the uncertainty it brings. And if you can sort of let people know that this decision is being made for this reason, you are a part of it. I have to digress for a second because it pops truly in my head. Sanjeet.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I think it's a good point for us to move into a different direction. So,
I just want to tell this one story real quick because it's a key leadership story, Sanjeet.
Sure, go ahead.
And I learned this from Jay Peretz, who was a leader that I really admired at Oracle. And he came to me for a really, really critical leadership meeting. And I was part of the leadership team. And he said, Tom, he goes, I need you to understand what the strategy is for this organization. We're going to change the strategy for the organization. And he describes it to me. And he goes, this is what I want to happen at the meeting. And I said, okay, sounds good. Why are you telling me? Like, that's your strategy. Go into the meeting, get everyone aligned around your strategy, and then, execute it. He goes, no. He goes, it's a little manipulative, I think, what he did, but it's very effective. And I've actually given this advice to other leaders. He said, no, because if I tell people this is what they need to do, they're not going to have buy-in. They're not going to feel part of it. They're not going to have passion for it. They're not going to be committed to it. He goes, you're sort of a leader that people respect. You do things behind the scenes. And he goes, I want you to sort of seed the idea and then move people in the direction I want to go.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, everyone in that room will feel like they're the ones that came up with this idea. They're the ones that they're the ones that innovated around this. They're the ones that came up with it and produced it. And he goes, they're going to want to go out and do it.
Wow. That's profound and part of goal, I would say. Yeah. You call yourself, or somebody called you, scrappy. I know I'm scrappy. My wife is a perfectionist, and we kind of complement each other. What is your opinion about scrappiness versus perfectionism? First of all, define scrappiness. I mean, I do not want to sound bad, but what does it actually mean to be scrappy? Is it scrappy all the way, like your food on the floor kind of scrappiness, or what scrappiness are we talking about? Is it like brilliant ideas every now and then that you kind of experiment a lot? What do you think? What do you think makes sense?
I don't think scrappiness needs to necessarily. It's interesting what comes first. I don't think scrappiness really needs to be big ideas.
Yeah, it could be asynchronous. Yeah,
it needs to be someone that's resourceful, that's ingenious, that comes up with invent and simplifies, to use AWS terms, that can see things and simplifies them, or comes up with new ideas. But it also can be something that takes someone's idea and actually makes it pragmatic. I think there's a lot of, when you say scrappy, it's someone that's looking at, how is this going to help? How is this going to help us achieve our end game? Not letting obstacles get in the way. Finding ways to either research the information. I mean, one of the first things that comes to mind when people ask me to do something knows more about that than I do. Who can I call? Who can I call that's going to help me out? Because I don't know all the dynamics of this. Or who, like, oh, someone told me about this tool, ChatGPT, or some way of solving this problem. Like, how can that help me? Like, what are the tools out there? What are the people out there? What are the things that I can use in order to make this happen? So I think it's someone that looks at a problem and doesn't get stifled by it, but finds ways to solve it, whether it's through utilizing tools, utilizing research, utilizing people they know. So I think it's someone that doesn't, I mean, one of the things I did, and I think this is the why I got coined as being scrappy in the interview process, is that I told a lot of stories about how I solved problems with limited resources, limited time, and found a way to persevere through them. I also think they like this article. I just went out because I was like, I'm going to learn as much about AWS, and I was an Oracle expert, and I was going to be hired like as an Oracle AWS person at AWS, which actually in the early days of AWS, by the end of the interview, they were hiring me for something else. But I was going in there with the Oracle and AWS. So when I went out and I got the Oracle database, and I went out there and I deployed Oracle on AWS, and I produced this like 3 or 4 page document that said, these are the issues with trying to deploy Oracle on AWS. Here's how I think they could be solved. Here's a way that I think can easily get more customers operating on AWS. So I think it's a whole combination of seeing the end game, understanding how you can quickly get there, how you can remove obstacles along the way, and how you can start off by saying, this isn't a problem. There's not a lot of obstacles here, or if there are obstacles, you just like blow right through them. You just remove them immediately by using your network, using tools available to you, and just researching it from every angle possible.
So what I heard was scrappiness is more like a broadly applied thing. Perfectionism, on the other hand, could be, when you have to go deeper into one of those things.
Well, so it's interesting, and I didn't address perfectionism.
Okay.
And I think it's my personality style.
That's all right. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of problems with perfectionism. And here, let me tell you a good story. I was friends with a surgeon a while back. And I said, we were talking with another friend, and I said, how did your day go? And he said, my day was great until I was stitching up someone's suture. And it was like 90% good. 90% good. And I was like, shit, I gotta get this to 100%. And they tried to get to 100%, and guess what? After 2 hours, it was now at 80%, and they couldn't fix it. I I think 80% in most cases is good enough. 90% is more than good enough. And trying to get to that last 10% is going to take you about 10 times as long and probably not going to give you a better result, or may give you a worse result. I think perfectionism, and I hate to say this because you said your wife, and I'm going to offend your wife, perfectionists are good at project management, perhaps program management, things that require finite detail.
Mm-hmm.
Excruciating to me, and this is me, excruciating and painful, redundant work, things that require to know every little detail about something. I think, and I alluded to this before, I think if you're a perfectionist, maybe you could be a leader of a bunch of people that just do very tedious and mundane tasks. But if you're going to be a leader of engineers, if you're going to be a leader of solution architects, if you're going to be a leader of artists, you're going to be a failure as a leader if you're a perfectionist.
People have this, mainly people who are just starting the careers. This either misconception or the curiosity about whether it's good to join a startup versus a big tech. So you have worked in all of those companies, right? You have been at startup for a long time. You've been at a big tech for a long time. My story is the same. I started with small companies, like 10 people companies. It had its own positive vibes to it, and then big tech. Been here for 10 years at Amazon. I learned a lot, like learned every day. Got to meet people like you. So what is your opinion? I mean, is it about money? Is it about kind of work that they're doing? What is it about?
Wow, this is going to be a challenging question because I'm actually personally going through this in my family life because I have a son that's graduating. He has a double major, which I think will serve him well. My sons could not. I wouldn't pay for my son's college unless they did STEM. So I was very adamant.
Yep, I heard that loud and clear. You
So
made that very clear. Yes,
yes,
right in front of me. Yes, so I know
yeah.
that.
So some people said that was very callous of me, but I equate it to if my sons would have been born like 150 years ago and farming was the thing, you do farming. I mean, that's where the money was at. That's where the jobs were at. I mean, today, tech is where the money and the jobs are at. Not that it's all about money and jobs, but certainly if you have some aptitude for it, it makes sense to go for it. And so and my sons do have aptitude in it. But he graduates with a double major in applied math and data analytics, and he's looking for what to do, and he's giving me guidance. And I have to say, as you asked me this question, I'm going to probably contradict myself because I think, number one, there's a lot of merit in you're young. You can afford to take career losses. Time is on your side. You can afford to lose 2 or 3 years, and I don't think it's losing 2 or 3 years. You're always going to learn shit. And if you haven't learned shit, then you're either not applying yourself enough or you got in the wrong predicament, which you should have extracted yourself from. Mm-hmm. But I think, and also money. I mean, you don't have a family. You don't have like financial obligations when you're young. Like, go out and take some risks. Like, I'm advocating for my son getting out of college, like, do a startup. In fact, I'm like, hey, I got like 3 or 4 startup ideas in my head. One of them is an idea called Too Soon, which is like getting to real estate, getting to markets before they're actually posted. But when someone's in financial distress, they're going through a divorce. Unfortunately, there's been a death in a family or something. People are looking to get rid of property, right? So help me do this startup. Like, I'll give you money. I'll give you some money to do the startup. I think you learn so much at a startup. You have to be multifaceted. You have to exhibit this range. I mean, you're going to get to be an engineer, but you could probably get to also be a salesperson or a trainer. Play multiple roles, and I think you got to take advantage of that when you're young, and you learn so much by doing a startup. So in thinking through this and talking through this, I think I'm thoroughly convinced that you should try some type of startup, whether how risky it is And it's not necessarily about the money. It's going to set you up for a good financial career. And you're also going to get to experiment with, what do I really like? Maybe you thought you wanted to be a coder, but then you got to a startup and you started to do some marketing, or you started to do some training, and then you decide maybe this isn't the path for me. I think starting off with a big company has some benefits. They have a lot of money. They can throw money at problems. They can throw money at you. And there's a lot of security in it. Knowing that you're working at a big company, you learn politics. Unfortunately, well, you learn politics in a small company too, but you definitely learn politics and bureaucracy at a big company. And I think the one thing I would advocate for people is that I was very nonconformist. I was much of a rebel, and I always like to fight the system. And authority always wins.
Yeah.
And so,
Always wins. Yeah.
Always wins.
Yeah.
So I think, you can't fight the system. And I think if you go to a big company and you're a rebel, you're a maverick, you're a nonconformist, it's going to be hard for you. So I think, for a young person, try as many companies and jobs as you can, I think is a good overall overarching strategy. But I think you're doing a disservice by not. I wish I would have even gone more startups and more risky when I was young. I think I didn't have the financial backing. I was trying to survive, so to speak. But I think if you have a little financial cushion,
yeah,
you should go out and just wing it.
Makes sense. That's a great advice. And while we are at it, and we cannot leave the elephant in the room unaddressed, and that is and because we are already on the topic of startups versus big tech, careers and so on. AI is happening, and AI is happening in a big way, right? Meta just recently announced that they are going to replace their mid-level or mid-tier coders with AI. Google has already fired or let go of so many employees because of AI. There were some announcements, I think, Sundar Pichai made, but the trend is clear. What I'm trying to say is that trend is clear. There are going to be a lot of called AI agents or AI workers that will do the mundane jobs. Do you think it's going to affect the job opportunities for young people, just starting their careers? For example, your son is about to graduate. My son will graduate in like 4 or 5 years, and I'm thinking about that. What will happen in 4 or 5 years? Should he study computer science or not? What is your opinion? Because clearly you're ahead of me in this journey. Your son is about to graduate. So what do you think?
Well, first and foremost, and so I'm going to do a blog post about this. AI is bullshit, and we can go into more of that.
Okay. Okay.
I think a lot of it is hype right now. It's always going to be hype. That being said, it does have long-term sustainability. I actually am adamant about this. I think I've been very good at sort of foreseeing and foretelling what's going to happen. I think AI, and the reason I say AI is bullshit, is quantum computing is the key to AI. I really feel, I'm adamant about this. I feel that with linear processing and the way processing happens on microchips that we currently have, like GPUs, you need that. I can do multiple paths at one path, as opposed to I'm going to try this path, I'm going to try it again, I'm going to try it again, then I'm going to come up with a result. I told my son this. I said, if I were you, and I mentor a couple of young people in their 20s, I'm like, get into quantum. Because to wrap this up and to come full circle, unless I talked about those different evolutions of technology along the way, along my career. Mainframes, I mentioned distributed computing. Then we went from distributed computing to the internet. We went from the internet to the cloud. Now we're going from cloud to AI, but I think we're going to go cloud, AI, quantum. I think quantum is the key to AI. I don't think it's sustainable on its current path. Yeah, ChatGPT is nice. Generative AI is sort of cool. But if you have a smart worker that knows how to write, they can produce some content that's superior to what Gen AI produces. I
Mm-hmm.
think, to me, I look at it this way. If you look at like Zillow and some of the forecasting algorithms that are out there, they all suck. They all
Mm-hmm.
miss the huge uptick in home prices in 2001, and now home prices are starting to fall, and they don't see it.
Yeah.
I think it's two things, and they're both related to quantum. Is number one, you need macroeconomic conditions. You need to see the macro, not the micro. And I think AI right now does one thing, and it can do one thing well. And this is where I think AI can exceed, like driving a car. It's one thing. It's very mechanical. It doesn't require thought knowledge. It doesn't require expanding your horizons. It doesn't require taking into a lot of variables. In fact, when it does require taking a lot of variables, it tends to crash because it cannot think fast enough to know that this is a semi or this is a brick wall.
Yeah.
So I think, for me, I advocate for my son, like I said, learn as much as you can about quantum. I think it's going to disrupt it. Going back to the Zillow example, what's happening with the economy? What's happening with wars? These Zillow algorithms don't take into account any of those things. It needs to take into account too many parameters that we can't possibly process. Now, do I think it's going to cause people to lose jobs? Hell, it always causes people to lose jobs. We went from mainframe to
Yeah.
distributed computing. Shitload of people lost their jobs, but you got to learn new shit.
Yeah.
We went
Exactly.
from distributed computing to internet, but what happened along the way is it actually broadened the number of people that are needed. And I think that's going to happen. I'm very hopeful about it.
Yeah.
I think AI is going to disrupt people that aren't willing to change. It's going to disrupt jobs that are going to go away. But if you learn the new jobs, goes back to your book too. And this is, we talked about it before we talked about this interview.
Yeah.
That's the one part about being hard. That's hard
Yeah.
in it. And it causes a lot of people mental anguish, causes a lot of people distress,
Yeah.
causes a lot of people to lose a lot of sleepless nights, because you do have to keep learning if you're in the technology field.
Yeah.
If you're an electrician, when's the last time a damn plug changed and electrical outlets changed? It's been 100 years. We've been using the same damn technology.
Yeah.
If you're in IT, shit is going to change. The good thing is it's going to progress people. It's going to create more jobs in the end, but it's going to cause a lot of people. I mean, look at the farming. I made the example of farming going to industrial. A lot of farmers lost their jobs. That's the way life rolls. That's the way
Yeah.
technology changes shit.
Yeah. Surprisingly, we still have farmers. We
do. And in fact, now it's a niche. Like there's certain niches. Like if you're, same thing. If you're a farmer and you have a niche and you do, farm to market, table to market or whatever, or farm to table, you make a lot of money. If you're a mainframe coder, you can still make a lot of money because you can't find a lot of mainframe coders.
Exactly. So yeah, I think you're right. I think what you're hinting at is to leapfrog the current trend and see what's coming up next. I think quantum is definitely important. I don't know how much the energy requirement is going to be. Probably.
Well, hey, we got fusion coming along.
Yeah, exactly. And China is making some good progress. We have made good progress in the US. We were, positive, I think, last year, which means that, we are actually using fusion to generate more energy that it can consumed to generate that energy, which is great news. So I think, humanity is progressing. So, I mean, we have come a long way from, like mundane things to the next wave of humanity, probably landing on Mars the next time we talk about. I think...
Well, I do think, Sanjeet, to that point, I do think, and especially in looking back at my career and then looking forward, is that all these technology evolutions, they lasted a long time. Like mainframe lasted for, you could argue, like 20 years or more, maybe 30, maybe more than that. And then the internet era sort of lasted, I don't know, 15 years or so. Cloud, that's getting condensed. The cloud era, I would argue, is almost coming to an end.
Yeah.
I think the compression rate and the rate of change is happening so quick. I think in 5 years, I can't even fathom. Like I personally can't even fathom what
Exactly.
What it's going to look like.
Yeah. And also I think life comes full circle. What was old is new again.